Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I made this edible tuile cake design. Now this was actually for my son's birthday. So if you stay tuned to the very end, I'm going to show you how I sliced this cake in preparation for the party. But I also added some other edible decorations using a special piping tip. But first of all, I'm going to show you how I made the layers. He loves Twix candy bars. So I wanted to make a shortbread layer. What I did was I bought some shortbread cookies, I pulsed them up, and then I added some melted butter. Now this is going to be kind of like a graham cracker crust. I needed it to be cuttable. That's why I mixed it with the butter. And I just mixed them together in a bag, placed them inside greased and lined with parchment paper on two 6-inch pans. And then I put them in the oven at 350 for about, I'd say, 15 to 20 minutes until they turn golden brown. Now I wrapped them up and saved them. I did all the prep work at home with the layers of cake. And now everything is wrapped up and ready to go. And I'll explain that later. But now I'm going to show you how I made the decorations for the top. I'm just making royal icing, and I'm using the recipe that's on the Wilton packet. You could do it with egg whites if you want to, but I happen to have the meringue powder, so I thought I'd just make it easy and just follow the directions on that. So you put your ingredients in there, just follow the directions on the package, and mix it for 5 to 7 minutes until it's glossy and thickened up. And this is the tip that I use. Now I'm going to say I was not real happy with this tip in particular. I ended up buying another one because this brand, it wasn't the best quality. They did not come out in circles. They came out in ovals. And that's just because of the way that the tip is made. Now, the one that I got, see how you can see the two sides are pinched in. Inside there's that piece in the middle that keeps the center open, and they're too tight on this particular tip. But that's okay. I cut them in half most of them, so you'll never know. But I just did those the day before and set them aside to dry. It's going to take some time for them to dry. You could do that with meringue if you want to, but I honestly didn't have time to do that, so I just stuck with the royal icing. And here I am making the tuile. I think I'm saying that right. And I will add the link for the recipe in the video description. But it's very easy. It's basically just a mixture of flour and oil, and you just go ahead and put it in your preheated pan. I added some gold color to it because I knew I was gonna make them gold, and you just let basically the oil separate from the rest of it. You just keep your eye on it. If it gets a little overdone in certain sections, it's okay. I wasn't worried about that because I knew I was going to add gold to them anyway. So once they have they remove themselves from the pan, basically. Once they loosen up, go ahead and just put them on paper towels so the paper towels will soak up the extra oil and so that they dry. They're going to dry crunchy. They will dry crunchy, but I'm going to show you a trick when we get to that. And this is how I layered the cake to mimic the candy bar. Was it Twix? Did I say Twix? That's what I meant to say. Anyway, so I did my chocolate cake on the bottom with chocolate chips in it. Then I did a layer of chocolate ganache, then the cookie, then chocolate ganache again, and then caramel. The reason I did the ganache on top and bottom of the shortbread layer is because I didn't want that layer to absorb moisture from the caramel. So I'm kind of sealing it is what I'm doing. And I'll add all the recipe links in the video description for this also, for all of the different flavors. And it was a little topsy-turvy, a little wobbly. That's why I put the skewer in there because, of course, since this was for my son, I kind of rushed it, and I should have let it chill longer. But the party was that night, and I didn't have time to let it sit. So listen to what I tell you to do. Don't do what I did. But I popped it in the refrigerator to firm up for 20 minutes. Then I was able to go in and do my final layers of chocolate ganache. There's no buttercream on this one at all. This is all chocolate ganache. And so I can get my crisp corners and my even sides because of that. And I put it back in the refrigerator until I was ready for the next step. And now the tuile pieces are ready. So I'm just using gold luster dust. I didn't have to mix anything with it, and just dusted it on to the pieces. And since there's a little bit of a oil residue left on them, it just shines up that gold perfectly. You could do any metallic that you want. You don't have to do metallic. You could go ahead and add whatever color you want to the mixture when you're cooking it. You can do many different colors. Then I set those aside, and now I'm just doing my fondant on the cake. Now, I don't know that this technique would work on buttercream. I know people are going to ask me this because not everybody likes fondant. Personally, I think it's delicious. It's a texture thing for a lot of people. So I would not suggest doing this on buttercream, and you will see why in a minute. And I am just doing the paneling method, and I cut a piece for the top, and then a circular piece a round piece for the top, I should say. And then I rolled out my fondant and I measured the height and circumference of the cake so that I knew that this piece would wrap around the cake with a little bit of extra. And I'm just adding a layer of shortening. I like to use shortening to attach my panel pieces, especially to ganache. Because I find that if I mess up and I need to move it, it's not a problem. If you use water or a simple syrup, which is fine, you're a little bit more locked in once you put it on the cake. That's why I prefer the shortening. And it's just going to soak into the fondant anyways. You'll never notice it. And then I'm just using a little piece of fondant here in my hand to do the final smoothing. I do have to remove some air bubbles, as you see there, with just a sharp needle. And then I remove the excess from the bottom. This is upside down, obviously. And then I turn it right side up and I smooth those pieces together and make sure that I got all my air bubbles out of there. Try to remove all the air bubbles. They're inevitable. They happen. But they could present a bigger problem later if you don't just go ahead and pop them at that point. And there I showed you how I mix my gold luster dust with my Everclear, and I'm using my cordless. Yes, there's a cord there, but it's not plugged into the wall. It's just a cord to the compressor airbrush that I love, and I'll try to remember to add that link also. And that's how I'm adding the gold to my pieces of royal icing. Now here's the cool part, guys. Use a clothing steamer. I would highly suggest purchasing one of those for this design if you want to do this. They're not that expensive. They're like 30 bucks. And I use them all the time for my cake design. So it's definitely not a waste of money. And what happens is these pieces are very fragile when they dry. But when you add that steam to them, they become flexible again. And the steam on the fondant makes it stick. You just have to work with it a little bit. And see, I'm trying not to touch it with my fingers. I'm trying to touch it as little as possible. That's why I was using the end of a brush there, because I don't want all of that gold to rub off on my fingers. The steam from the steamer actually makes it even brighter, but just try to keep your touching it to a minimum. And I use a paper towel there because when you add this much steam, sometimes it'll want to drip a little bit. So I'm just cleaning that off of the board and anywhere that it's wanting to like pop up in the little holes, that nice texture you get with the tuile. I'm just adding them randomly. What I kind of wish I had done, and I got one after the fact, I kind of wish I had done these pieces in a square pan. That way I could have just wrapped it around instead of doing these circular pieces. Either way, I think it looks really good, but if you want to wrap it around the whole thing, I would suggest using a square pan. And of course, would not be a merry video without missing footage. So, of course, the footage I don't have is attaching the royal icing pieces. The tip that I used is called Sultan tip. I think that's how you say it. But I just attached everything with a little dab of buttercream. That's all I did. There's really not that much more to it. And then I added some gold dragées, just to kind of add an angle there. And now here's the end part. Now I had put it in the refrigerator or in the freezer to firm up. I accidentally lied earlier. I put it together a couple days before the party. Days, not that day. But I still was in a rush. So my cake is frozen at this point, and this would work much better at room temperature or chilled. But I wanted to show you those layers and how I cut it. You can get a lot of pieces out of a 6-inch cake. You really can. And these pieces, some of them are very large. You could even cut them in half. But these pieces were for 16-year-old boys and a few girls. They can down some cake. So guys, awkward place for this video to end, but that's honestly it for this one, and I hope you liked it, and we'll catch you on the next one.